Okay, today we will going to start the working of heart. Like in the previous class, we have discussed about the structural parts of the heart or the structure of the heart. Now we will going to discuss how this heart pumps the blood and how it works. Now see how this heart works actually. The working of heart includes cardiac cycle. That means a cycle run by heart is known as cardiac cycle. This cardiac cycle includes particular two types of phases: systolic phase and diastolic phase. Systolic means the contraction phases, contraction phase, and diastolic means relaxation phase. Now, this two types of phases takes place in all the four chambers. That means the systolic phase takes place in right auricle and also in right ventricles. Same, the diastolic phase also found in right auricles, right ventricles, as well as systolic phase also takes place in left auricles, left ventricles, as well as left. Diastolic phase also takes place in left auricle, right auricles, left auricles and left ventricles. Right? So all auricles and ventricles undergoes the systolic phase and diastolic phase. Now this cardiac cycle, that means one particular cycle duration is all about 0.8 second. This 0.8 second is the duration of one cardiac cycle. Now what is this cardiac cycle is all about? So let's discuss it. What happens in case of heart? Like again, I have to draw a diagram of heart in order to explain its working. Now this is the overall structure of heart. Like this is, we all know, it's a pulmonary vein. This is pulmonary artery. This is aorta, the major blood vessel. This is superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and this is our right auricle, left auricle, right ventricle, left ventricle. Now how this heart works actually? Now as we all know, we have studied about the structural parts of the heart, that this our heart is four chambered, upper auricle and lower ventricle. Now in both the side of the heart, that means the right side of the heart is known as pulmonary heart and the left side of the heart is known as systematic heart. We have discussed it in the previous class also. Why this heart is known as pulmonary heart? Because it pumps blood to the lungs for its oxygenation. Why? Because this right side of the heart is receiving deoxygenated blood from lower and upper body part. So the blood which is deoxygenated, which is receiving by the right auricle. So what happened? The right side of the heart is receiving the deoxygenated blood. It is receiving deoxygenated blood, while the left side of the heart, since through vena cava the right side is receiving deoxygenated blood, and similarly the left auricle receives oxygenated blood from lungs through a vein. Exceptional case है ये vein का, that is pulmonary vein, which carries the oxygenated blood from lungs. So here the oxygenated blood is transferring to the left chamber. Now see, during entry of the blood into the auricles, these valve, that is bicuspid and tricuspid valve, this is tricuspid valve and this is bicuspid valve. During the entry of blood, whether it is oxygenated or deoxygenated from right side and the left side respectively, into the auricles, the valves of right side and the left side, that is tricuspid and bicuspid valve, remain closed. Now what happens due to entry of more and more blood in the auricles? Now the volume of blood, basically here the amount of blood which is entering causes the pressure in the wall or throughout the walls of auricle. How it causes high pressure? Actually there is one more thing is present in our right auricle, that is we have certain type of neuromuscular fiber, that is SA node. This SA node. SA node is also known as pacemaker of heart. It is also known as pacemaker of heart, or also known as heart of heart. This is a type of neuromuscular fiber. That means it passes signal to the wall of auricle. Whenever the blood enters into the auricles, this neuromuscular fiber known as sinoatrial node. The full form of SA node is sinoatrial node. This sinoatrial node basically activates on entry of water. The sinoatrial node activates on entry of water. Now, on entry of blood. Fine. Due to entry of blood, the SA node gets activated, present in the wall, near the wall of right auricle. This muscular fiber, neuromuscular fiber, when activate, it passes signal or releases neuron signal only in both the auricles. So these signal get transferred to the auricles also. And whenever these signal get transferred, whole auricle part, that is right and left side, undergoes the contraction phase, undergoes the systolic phase. So when it contracts, when it undergo the systolic phase, the blood present in the auricle will become at higher pressure. And once the blood comes at higher pressure, then what happen? Both the bicuspid and tricuspid valve gets open up. So what is happening here? Since blood, whether it is oxygenated and deoxygenated. Oxygenated on the left side and deoxygenated on the right side, enters into auricles. Fine. Now what happens in the auricle? In the right auricle, SA node activates and it produces impulse. This impulse spread throughout the auricles, whether it is right side or left side. Now this auricles undergoes contraction, that means the systolic phase. When auricles is present in their systolic phase, at that particular time the ventricles were in their diastolic phase. At the same time, ventricles in diastolic phase, that means they remain relaxed at time. Now when the auricles contract, what happened? The tricuspid plus bicuspid valves opens. It opens up. Now when it opens, the blood from auricle will going to thrush into the ventricles. So when it opens up, the blood from auricles now enters into ventricles. Fine. Now what happens? When the blood is thrashing into ventricle, now the auricle undergoes relaxation phase. Due to entry of blood from auricle to ventricle, now the auricles will follow or enters into their relaxation phase known as diastolic phase. Now when this blood is thrashing into the ventricles, see here the blood is thrashing into the ventricles. So what happens now? There is one more node present near the wall of AV septum, and this node is known as AV node, auricular ventricular node, because it present on the septum, that is AV septum. Now this signal which is releasing from SA node, the signal passes to this AV node, and through this AV node only bundle of neuromuscular fiber, it is passing to the interventricular septum. This bundle of fiber which is arising from AV node and transferring into interventricular septum, this is known as bundle of His. This bundle of His is releasing out its branches into the ventricles wall, and these are known as Purkinje fibers. Now what happened? Whenever SA node transfer the impulses to AV node, this AV node is transferring their impulse to bundle of His, and this bundle of His transferring those signal to Purkinje fiber, due to which the whole ventricle, that means the wall of ventricle, now will going to be contract. And when this contraction phase takes place, or when this contraction starts, the pressure of blood which is entering into the ventricle will become at higher pressure. So what is happening here? When this blood from auricle enters into the ventricle, auricles enters into the diastolic phase, but the ventricles enters into their systolic phase. Here the ventricles enters into their systolic phase. Fine. Now when this ventricles undergo the systolic phase, how it enters into the systolic phase is, see, because of the signal or impulses transferring through the root of AV node to bundle of his and bundle of his to Purkinje fiber, the ventricles undergo systolic phase. And when the systolic phase takes place in ventricle, the pressure of blood gets higher in ventricles. Now what happened? This pressure of blood when increases in ventricle, now both bicuspid and tricuspid wall gets closed. Now what is happening? Both the AV valves gets closed. Now whenever they closed, the first heart sound produced, that is lub. The first heart sound produced known as lub. So जब भी गेट बंद होता है तभी साउंड की मतलब साउंड प्रोड्यूस होता है, आवाज़ आती है. गेट के खुलने से कभी भी आवाज़ नहीं आएगी. इसीलिए जो सबसे पहला हार्ट साउंड प्रोड्यूस होगा वो दोनों वॉल्व के बंद होने से होगा. सो व्हेनेवर दीज टू वॉल्व्स गेट्स क्लोज देन ओनली द फर्स्ट हार्ट साउंड प्रोड्यूस नोन एज लब. द इंटेंसिटी ऑफ दिस साउंड इज समवट लोअर. नाउ what is happening? Due to closure of these valve, pressure becomes more higher in the ventricle. Now what happened? After increasing of pressure in the ventricle or after passing through the systolic phase in the ventricles, both the semilunar valves means the valve which is present on the AV septum, but one semilunar valve opens into pulmonary artery, other semilunar valve opens into aorta. Both the semilunar valves opens up, and due to opening of the semilunar valve, the deoxygenated blood from right ventricle enters into pulmonary artery. Here this deoxygenated blood is then entering into pulmonary artery, and the oxygenated blood is then enter into aorta, and through these pulmonary artery the deoxygenated blood goes to lungs, and through the aorta the oxygenated blood goes to body system. Fine. So in this manner, from ventricle the blood will going to release now through aorta and through pulmonary artery. Now what is happening? The pressure will reduces in the ventricles, and due to reduction in the pressure, now the ventricles undergo relaxation phase known as diastolic phase. When ventricles comes in the diastolic phase, alternatively the auricles comes under its systolic phase. So this systolic and diastolic phases of auricle and ventricle comes or going through alternatively. Whenever this ventricles releases the blood, now when the pressure reduces in the ventricle, both the semilunar valve get closed. So another heart sound produces known as dub on closure of both the semilunar valve present on the right and left ventricles wall. So in this manner, basically the heart is working by pumping blood, by carrying out a cardiac cycle which follows two types of phases, that is systolic and diastolic phase. So what is happening here? See, here I have written that both the AV valve gets closed, first heart sound produces, then after what is happening? Now the systolic phase of ventricles start, then semilunar valves opens, then after pressure in ventricles reduces, that means the ventricles undergo now diastolic phase, and at the same time now auricles enters into their systolic phase. And due to pressure when reduces, Now the semilunar walls closed, and second heart sound produces known as dub. So here the sound produces lub and dub, that is the first heart sound produces on the closure of bicuspid and tricuspid valve, and the second heart sound produces on closure of semilunar valve. So always sound produces due to closure of gates, not opening of gates. So in this manner, the blood is circulating in the heart twice. That is why in human beings or in all mammal and vertebrate, we found the circulation of blood as double circulation circuit. But in case of fishes, we have only circulation of blood throughout heart only once. So that follows single circulation of blood, because there were no two auricle or two ventricle present in case of fishes. There is only one auricle and one ventricle. So the blood is transferring or circulating to the heart through only one time. But in our human heart, we have 4 chambers, 2 auricle and 2 ventricles. So in our heart, we have 2 sides, right side and left side. So the blood is transferring or blood is passing to the heart twice a time. That is why we have double circulation system. Now what is this? The circulation or complete circuit of blood. Here what is the route of blood? We have 4 chambers, the right auricle, left auricle, right ventricle and left ventricle. Now here we have lungs and we have body systems. Now what is happening? Through lungs, a pulmonary vein entering into the left auricle and through this right ventricle. The pulmonary artery carried to the lungs from right ventricle, and through this left ventricle, aorta move out and passes the oxygenated blood to different body system, and through body systems this vena cava, whether it is superior vena cava or inferior, the deoxygenated blood moves to the right auricle part. So in this manner we are observing the pumping of blood is twice throughout the heart. How? Like here the body system is transferring the deoxygenated blood to the right auricle. It is deoxygenated blood having carbon dioxide, not oxygen. This blood is pumping to right auricle, which is again transferring to right ventricle, and through right ventricle it is transferring to pulmonary artery, which is carrying up to the lungs. This is again deoxygenated blood only. Now in lungs this deoxygenated blood gets oxygenated because here more oxygen is present, and here this oxygenated blood is transferring to the left auricle through pulmonary vein. This left auricle transfer the oxygenated blood to ventricle, and this left ventricle transfer this oxygenated blood to aorta. So this is an oxygenated blood, and through aorta all the oxygenated blood again we are transferring to different body system. So once the blood is transferring to right side and then another circulation the blood is transferring to left side. That is why we have double circulation system in human being and in all kind of vertebrates or mammals. So this is all about the working of heart as well as the circulatory system. That is, in mammals we have double circulation, and in fishes we have single circulation only, because in fishes we have only one auricle and one ventricle. There was no two auricle or two ventricle. So the blood is circulating once only throughout the heart of fishes. Now let's discuss certain important terminology related to heart, that means related to measurement of heart. The working of heart in the form of heartbeat or heart rate, or you can say pulse rate. Now, heartbeat. What is heartbeat now? As we all know, we have discussed about the working of the heart, that one particular cardiac cycle, that means when the 4 chambers of the heart undergo its systolic and diastolic phase for one time, that means for one time, with duration is about 0.8 second. Then how many times it produces its lub and dub sound in 1 minute, that is known as heartbeat. That means the number of sound, that means number of lub sound and dub sound produces per minute by passing through cardiac cycle, that is throughout in 1 minute only, that is known as heartbeat. Heartbeat means the sound produced lub and dub in 1 minute, that is heartbeat. And this heartbeat, that means the number of heartbeat produced per minute consider as heart rate. This is known as heart rate. And this heart rate is around 70 to 72 times per minute, because if duration of one heartbeat is 0.8 second, so the duration of those, or the number of heartbeat produced 1 minute is, we can calculate it by like 0.8 second for one. So how many number of sound produces in 1 minute? That comes out to be 70 to 72 times per minute. Now this is about heartbeat or heart rate. Now what is pressure? Now we all know about the pressure known as blood pressure. Now what is this term blood pressure is? The heart, when it pumps the blood, whether it pumps the blood oxygenated or it is pumping blood, the deoxygenated blood. So whatever the blood pumped by the heart, the blood vessel will going to face or exert certain kind of pressure on their wall. So due to pumping of blood by the heart during its cardiac cycle, the pressure is exerted on the wall of blood vessel, whether it is arteries or veins. That is known as blood pressure. This blood pressure is actually of two types, systolic and diastolic. That means when the heart contract, that time when blood pumped, then the pressure which is exerted during the contraction of the heart on the wall of blood vessel, that pressure is known as systolic pressure. And when the heart relaxes, that means when the ventricular auricles gets relaxed, at that time the blood, when passes to the blood vessel, the pressure which is exerted on the blood vessel wall during the diastolic phases of the chambers of the heart is known as diastolic blood pressure. The value of it is, systolic blood pressure is 120 mmHg. This is the normal blood pressure found in normal human beings, and the diastolic is 80 mmHg. So we can say the normal blood pressure is 120 mmHg in normal blood or normal human being. So this is about blood pressure. This blood pressure is measured by an instrument known as sphygmomanometer. Sphygmomanometer. This is an instrument, like you all know, if we go to any doctor, they used to cuff that device in the in our this brachial part, fine, in our hands, and they used to pump that device. They used to pump that device with their hand, and they used to measure the blood pressure, that the contraction phase, that means systolic and diastolic pressure, how it present in our blood vessel. So if the normal blood pressure comes, that means 80-120 mmHg, the cardiac cycle is running properly. But if the pressure is somewhat lower or below, then different disorder may create, like if blood pressure gets high, then the condition is known as hypertension. And if blood pressure gets low, condition is known as hypotension. The value of these blood pressure may vary from that normal value. Higher means the pressure may going to be like 100 of around 150 mmHg. This can be the high blood pressure, and the low blood pressure may be around 60-100 mmHg. Fine. So this is of about low blood pressure. Right? Those hypotension, and the hypertension is the condition created due to fluctuation in the blood pressure, whether it is high or low. And the causes of this fluctuation in the blood pressure may be anything due to stress condition. Mainly in the stress condition also, the pressure may become high and it may also become low. Now there is another term we used to consider for working of heart as pulse rate. Now what is this pulse rate? Like if you have observed, whenever you go to any doctor, that they used to measure this pulse. This is hand. That means in your wrist, they used to just observe certain number of beats or number of heart rate. They used to measure through this wrist. What they are doing is, whenever the heart pumping the blood, whenever heart pumps your blood, at that time the heart when present in the systolic phase. In the systolic phase, the heart pumps the blood with higher pressure, and that high pressure blood moves to arteries. So whatever the pressure feels on the wall of artery, that rate of, that means the number of heartbeat when produces during the systolic phase of heart, and when it feels in the wall of artery, that is known as actually pulse rate. That means pulse rate basically is a measure of number of heartbeat feels during contraction of the heart, and it measure the pressure on wall of arteries only. So this pulse rate is synchronized, or somewhat its value is equal to that of heart rate, that is 70 to 72 times per minute only. But this is only, the thing is, this is measured in artery only, while the heart rate can measured in all blood vessels. Fine. Heart rate is measured by using our stethoscope on the thoracic region. Like doctor used to use that stethoscope device, and they used to check their heart rate or heartbeat by keeping them on your thorax region, and they used to listen the number of heartbeat. Fine. So the heartbeat or heart rate can be defined or can be diagnosed or observed through, in the thoracic part directly from the heart, but the pulse rate can be measured from your pulses or from your wrist. That means here also they used to feel the pressure in the artery wall, that how much pressure or how many time the number of heartbeat they are feeling in this wrist watch, that means in the arteries present in the wrist. Fine. So this pulse rate can measure in the arteries, or it can be measured anywhere, but this is heart rate is measured by using stethoscope device. There is another device used to diagnose the proper working of the heart is electrocardiograph. This electrocardiograph is the device. This is an instrument. Basically, this electrocardiograph is an electrical machine through which certain electrical wire has been placed on our thoracic part, and they used to collect or observe the signal producing on the computer screen or computer system attached to that device. If your heart is working properly, then a proper standard form of signal arises on that computer system. So the device is known as electrocardiograph, and the recorded, or you can say the test, the recording which appear, graphical representation which appear on the computer system is known as ECG. So this is recording. Fine. That means the data, that means the proper result of working of heart which is appearing in the form of graph on the computer system is known as ECG, and the device name is known as electrocardiograph. So this is all about the heart, the structure of heart, working of heart, certain terms related to detection of heartbeat, heart rate, pulse rate or blood pressure, and the machine or devices, that is biological devices, which is used to diagnose the proper working of heart, we have discussed here. Now in the next lecture we will going to discuss the last component of blood system is basically the circulatory system is lymphatic. Fine. Thank you.